Tremors of Redemption. Chapter 1. Echoes of Dawn. The sun, a soft golden orb, spilled warmth across Haven's embrace, illuminating vibrant wildflowers that danced in the gentle breeze. The sweet scent of their blossoms mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil and the faint crackle of nearby campfires. Gaiya Yelith knelt in thick grass, tracing intricate patterns in the dirt with a slender finger, a nervous habit that anchored him amidst the chaos. Around him, the refugees clustered, their faces drawn and weary. Children's laughter floated on the wind, a stark contrast to the shadows clinging tightly to the adults. Gaiya inhaled deeply, his hands trembling as he prepared to share the stories that had once brought him solace. But as he opened his mouth, doubt coiled in his chest like a tightening vine. "Gather round, my friends," Gaiya began, his voice flowing like a soft lullaby above the murmurs. "I have stories that can bring a smile even in the darkest times. My ancestors spoke of resilience, of a time when the earth trembled, yet they stood firm, united against the storm." He paused, his fingers stilling in the sand, memories echoing in his mind. The scent of blooming wildflowers reminded him of home, where hope had once flourished before tragedy shattered it all. A few faces turned towards him, curiosity flickering like candlelight, but others turned away, their expressions set with fear. Gaia's shoulders slumped under the weight of their grief, a damp blanket that made it hard to breathe. I once knew a friend who healed those in pain, who could mend the very fabric of life itself," he continued, his voice trembling. "But in my haste I caused destruction instead. A moment of panic and I lost everything. I carry that guilt still, like a shadow that never fades." He let the words hang in the air, hoping they might resonate. The ground quaked suddenly, a low rumble that made the grass shiver beneath them. Panic erupted, children screamed, and adults scrambled for safety. Gaiya sprang to his feet, shouting to rise above the chaos. "Stay together," he urged, urgency threading through his tone. "We can face this together." But as he spoke, memories of his own failures surfaced like ghosts. Would they flee, just as he had in the past? A few refugees gathered closer, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. Gaiya took a shaky breath, grounding himself in their presence. "In the face of uncertainty, we must find strength in each other. I remember a time when my people faced a great threat, an encroaching darkness that sought to swallow us whole. We stood united, hands clasped, hearts beating as one. The stories we shared became our shield, our light in the abyss." His gaze swept over the crowd, searching for a... Sitting at the water's edge, Gaia's breath caught as chaos unfolded around him, the pressure of his ancestors' legacy heavy on his chest. The cool surface of the lake mirrored his fraying resolve, reflecting the tumult in his heart. Laughter that once filled Haven's embrace was now punctuated by cries of panic, the sun dipping low and casting long shadows that intertwined with the uncertainty in the air. He clenched his fists, pushing despair away from the fragile sanctuary, determined to weave hope like a tapestry, steadfast against the past's tremors that threatened to swallow him whole. Every ripple in the water seemed to echo his inner turmoil, yet he knew he had to rise above it to find strength in vulnerability and connection. Gaia's fingers trailed through the water, sending ripples outward as memories surged, faces of those he had failed, each one a reminder of the burden he carried. A pang of guilt tightened within him, stirring old fears. He glanced at the refugees, uncertainty etched on their faces made his heart race with purpose. Yet he straightened, clarity sharpening his focus. Vulnerability could bridge the chasm of distrust, and he had to try. Rising, Gaiya grounded himself against the cool earth, determination flooding his veins. Each step towards the gathered crowd felt monumental, the air thick with unspoken fears. He opened his mouth to speak, choosing honesty over grand proclamations. "I understand loss. I've felt the earth tremble beneath me, felt fear grip my heart. But together we can weave a new path forward, one thread at a time." Silence enveloped them, a fragile moment suspended in time, his words resonating in the stillness. He watched their expressions shift from suspicion to something softer, hope flickered like a candle in the dark, alive but needing care to grow stronger. As he shared the story of his own loss, the tremor that had shattered his world, their defenses began to waver. An energy shifted, a pulse of collective resilience starting to form. Yet, the shadow of uncertainty lingered in his mind, the question of whether he could truly lead them. Gaiya inhaled deeply, the scent of earth rich with promise.
A soft murmur rose among the refugees, a tentative acknowledgement of his words. Trust was not a single moment, but a series of shared stories. Surrounded by familiar and new faces, he felt the path ahead shimmer with possibility. This was just the beginning, and he hoped they would walk it with him.
As dusk settled over Haven's embrace, Gaiya Yelith crouched at the water's edge, the cool surface reflecting the flickering campfires that dotted the landscape like distant stars. The scent of smoked fish mingled with the earthy aroma of wild herbs wafting from communal fires, where families gathered sharing meager rations. The air brimmed with unspoken fears of the refugees who had fled the chaos of the tremors. A tumult of doubt and longing surged within Gaiya as shadows deepened, the first stars appearing overhead like the eyes of the vanished, watching and judging. He had stumbled before, but tonight hope flickered within him, urging him to reach out and guide others despite the heavy shadows of his past. Gaiya glanced over at the nearest fire, where a group of children picked at dried roots and foraged berries, their laughter a fragile balm against the uncertainty surrounding them. An elder sat nearby, his rough-spun cloak draped over his shoulders, sharing stories of the land spirits. As the children leaned in, wide-eyed, wrestling with his own demons, he cast one last glance at the warmth and connection he longed for. Deep breaths of the crisp air invigorated him while pondering the weight of his own tale, the loss that had turned him into a shadow of himself. The crackle of a nearby fire brought Gaiya back to the present. He beheld a woman, hands like gentle currents, pouring life into a bowl, offering warmth to a weary soul. "Please eat, my friend. May the flame grant you health, and may Alara show you the way to strength," she said, her voice warm and inviting. A tremor of longing coursed through him, for her warmth ignited shadows of desire within. Would he ever wield such nurturing light? He rubbed the obsidian shard hanging around his neck, a talisman against Draxon's anger, the guardian of the lost, and a reminder of his fractured spirit. A rustle behind him drew Gaia's attention to a group of men forming a circle, their voices low as they discussed dwindling food supplies. One of them, a tall man adorned with a beaded necklace that spoke of his wealth, scoffed at the idea of sharing rations with the newcomers. "They should earn their keep first," he said dismissively. Gaia's heart sank. He recognized this divide, the wealthy hoarding resources while the vulnerable struggled. The way the man's family name hung on his lips felt like a challenge that could ignite conflict. Gaiya hesitated, weighing the risk of speaking up against the potential fallout of breaking social norms. As the last rays of sunlight slipped away, Gaia's resolve hardened. He stood, dusting off his trousers, and took a deep breath. "We must entwine our tales, binding them like the threads of the cosmos, for together we transcend mere survival. We embody unity," he called out, hoping to bridge the gap between fear and togetherness. The gathered refugees looked up, some wary. Dawn's light crept over the healing grounds, illuminating the weary faces of the refugees huddled together, their breath visible in the cool morning air. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center, the weight of his mission pressed down on him, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Today was the day he would share his story of loss and resilience, a tale that could ignite hope within this fractured community. But time pressed down like an iron shackle. If he failed to connect with them before the week ended, he would confront a promise he had been avoiding, a pact that could unravel everything he had fought to rebuild. 3 days left, only 3 days to inspire them, to show them that healing was possible or risk losing their trust forever. Gaiya cleared his throat, the sound barely cutting through the murmurs of skepticism that rippled through the crowd. "I can feel your wounds, the weight of your shadows. Together we can see the dawn breaking through." A few heads turned, curious but guarded. He could see the doubt they wore, the fear of reliving their past traumas. In the dim light, one woman, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, shook her head. "What do you know of our pain? You're just a storyteller." Her voice sliced through the air like glass, leaving Gaiya momentarily speechless. The clock ticked mercilessly, amplifying his anxiety as he grappled with the reality of his struggle. Some refugees exchanged glances, the tension palpable, each moment stretching into eternity. Gaiya pressed on, desperation clawing at his throat. "This tale is not merely mine, it flows through each of us, a river of loss and hope. Together we shall rise from these ashes." The words hung in the air, but instead of rallying them, they sparked arguments. Rise? To what? More pain? A man shouted, his voice filled with anger. "You think sharing our stories will change anything?" Gaia's stomach twisted as he sensed the fractures widening, the murmurs growing louder.
drowning out his voice. Time slipped away. He needed them to listen, to believe, but each second that passed felt like a nail in the coffin of his hope. A knot of refugees began to drift away, their backs turned on him, their disinterest a physical blow. Gaia's heart thudded wildly. He was losing them. "Please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I know it hurts, I know it feels impossible, but we have to try." A silence fell thick and heavy before a young girl whispered, "What if we don't want to feel anymore? What if it's easier to forget?" Gaia's breath hitched. Her words struck him like a blow. He could almost hear the clock ticking mercilessly, a relentless reminder of the deadline looming over him. He had to reach them before the week ended, or face the consequences of his.
As dawn lightened the sky over the healing grounds, remnants of yesterday's gathering lay scattered on the grass. Discarded banners fluttered in the breeze, echoes of unfulfilled promises. Gaiya stood amongst the debris, a heavy weight on his chest. "I won't let you down. We can heal together," he had declared, but determination quickly faded beneath the tide of doubt. He saw the stiff backs of those who once dared to hope, their silhouettes retreating into the distance. A bitter chill swept through him, mingling with the fresh morning air, igniting a flicker of resolve that urged him to confront the fears shackling him. Could he embrace the past, raw and unfiltered? Gaia's gaze lingered on the scattered remnants, each piece a reminder of the arguments that had filled the air like smoke. His fingers clenched at his sides, nails digging into his palms. The sharp words and harsh rejections stung more than any blade. They didn't trust him, not after everything. The thought suffocated him. Yet, in the dawn's silence, he felt a fragile spark of hope. Perhaps their scars mirrored his own, a shared history of loss and longing. The question weighed heavily: how could he bridge that chasm? The earth beneath him thrummed with promise as the sun crested the horizon, spilling golden light over the healing grounds. Shadows flickered, and for a moment Gaiya envisioned a tapestry of stories woven together, each thread representing a life intertwined with pain and resilience. Urgency surged through him. Vulnerability loomed like a wave, threatening to crash over him. What if he reached out, laid bare his truth stripped of pretense? The thought electrified him, yet fear whispered doubts that curled around his resolve. Would they listen? Would they care? With a deep breath, he stepped forward, past the remnants of the past, into the light. The air felt fresh and charged, filling his lungs and sweeping away despair. Each step was a declaration, a commitment to confront those fears. He envisioned the refugees, their faces etched with pain and resilience, longing to break through the barriers of silence. He wanted them to know he understood. He had faltered, lost in the shadows, but now he stood ready to share his truth, raw and unpolished. It was a risk he was willing to take. The cost of silence felt heavier than the fear of rejection. As the sun climbed higher, casting warmth over the healing grounds, Gaiya paused. The future felt fragile, yet he grasped it tightly. He would weave his past into a story of hope, not just for himself, but for those who had suffered in silence. A single question lingered in the air, unspoken yet profound. Would they see him as one of their own? With that thought, he opened his mouth to speak, the words forming like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. Chapter 2: Embers of Dawn. Dusk settled over Haven's embrace like a heavy blanket, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. The shimmering lake at the center of the caldera reflected hues of turquoise and gold, its gentle ripples whispering secrets of the past. Gaiya Yelith sat by the water's edge, the promise to protect the refugees feeling like a heavy burden on his shoulders. 3 days had passed since the attack, and the countdown loomed ominously within him. By the end of the week, if he failed to find redemption, the consequences would be irreversible. The community needed him now more than ever, yet doubt gnawed at him, threatening to pull him back into the shadows he had fought to escape. Gaiya inhaled sharply, the cool air prickling his lungs. Memories of their terrified faces during the attack flashed before him. Children crying, mothers shielding their young, the smoke billowing upward, dark and ominous. His pulse quickened, each beat a reminder that time was slipping through his fingers. He had to step up to lead, yet the thought of facing their expectant eyes filled him with dread. Sweat beaded on his brow as he imagined their whispers. He was supposed to protect us, but retreating into his fear would be a betrayal, a disservice to every soul who relied on him. Guilt twisted in his stomach, and an unspoken tension hung in the air. Anticipation settled heavily on him, a dark cloud looming overhead.
He fought against the rising tide of despair, knowing he had to speak, to act. How could he erase the scars left by his past mistakes? The water lapped at his feet, grounding him in the moment as he forced himself to stand, his resolve wavering. He glanced toward the camp, where flickering firelight illuminated the worried faces of the refugees. He had promised them hope, yet here he was, paralyzed. With only 5 days left, could he truly transform his past into a narrative of strength? The fear of disappointing them nearly choked him. A choice hovered in front of him, unyielding like the ticking clock. Just as he turned to face the camp, a frantic shout broke through the quiet, sending a ripple of panic through the gathered crowd. "Gaiya, we need you now!" The urgency in the voice ignited his resolve anew, reminding him that time was not just running out, it was spiraling into chaos. He hurried toward the source of the call, knowing the path ahead would demand everything he had left, and more. The shadows of doubt retreated slightly as the call for help brought clarity to his purpose. This was his moment to rise above the fear, to step into the role he had promised to fulfill. Each step felt like a declaration of intent, a commitment to protect and to lead. Gaia's heart raced, not just from fear but from the
dusk engulfed Haven's embrace, casting long shadows across the canyon refuge. Gaiya Yelith stood at the edge of the camp, a fragile piece hanging in the air. "Stay close, everyone," he murmured, his voice steady, a pulse quickening beneath his calm facade. He had promised their safety, a vow that tightened his fists with each passing second. With only 3 days left until the week's end, his chance for redemption dwindled, and the thought of breaking his promise loomed large. As darkness settled, the air thickened with tension, and the echo of a distant explosion shattered the stillness, sending ripples of dread through the gathered crowd. A deafening roar erupted, panic spreading among the refugees, faces filled with terror scattered like leaves before a storm. Just as Gaiya had begun weaving hope from his stories, chaos erupted. "Stay together," he shouted, but his command was lost in the uproar. Shadows morphed into hostile figures, weapons glinting ominously in the fading light. The locals emerged like phantoms, rage igniting their eyes. "Leave now," one bellowed, the demand cutting through the panic. Every instinct screamed for Gaiya to flee, to grab the nearest child and run. But he couldn't abandon them. The clock's relentless ticking grew louder in his mind. "We can't leave, we." His voice faltered as he faced the locals, weapons raised, glinting with deadly intent. A deep breath steadied him momentarily, but he staggered under the weight of responsibility. Choices narrowed to impossible extremes: fight and risk lives, or retreat and lose everything he'd fought for. As the locals advanced, Gaiya stepped forward, hands raised in surrender. "Please, they need shelter, not violence." The leader's gaze hardened, and a wave of desperation surged within him. He turned to the refugees, resolve igniting in his chest. "Trust me, we can find a way out together." But the fear in their eyes mirrored his own, as the locals drew closer, weapons raised, chaos swallowing the last threads of peace. "Gaiya," a familiar voice called from the crowd. He turned to find Lyra, panic in her expression. "What do we do?" The urgency in her voice amplified the moment. The locals advanced, closing in around him. Should he lead them into the canyon's narrow paths, where they might find safety, or stay and fight, risking everything? He clenched his fists, feeling the tension in his chest. Every second that slipped away brought danger closer. "Go!" he yelled, pushing Lyra and the others toward the canyon's mouth. But as they stumbled into the shadows, a harsh shout rang out behind them, followed by a gunshot echoing through the canyon. Time was running out. The dusk sky wrapped around me, a tapestry of deep purples and fading golds. It felt as if the world was cradling me, like a nurturing embrace from the universe itself. I stood at the water's edge in Haven's embrace, the cool breeze from the shimmering lake brushing against my skin and carrying the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers from the shore. The vibrant hues of the water rippled and shifted, reflecting the last light of the day like a shattered mirror. Distant laughter from children echoed against the towering cliffs, a haunting reminder of both joy and pain. Everything felt impossibly alive, yet I remained disconnected from the warmth of the community thriving in the makeshift camps beyond the trees. I knelt beside the water, the cool earth crumbling beneath my fingers, grounding me amidst chaos. The reflections shimmered like memories, flashes of laughter, faces I'd sworn to protect, but doubt clawed at my chest, tightening like a vice. I inhaled deeply,
The earthy aroma of damp soil mingled with floral sweetness, a reminder of resilience amidst despair. As the laughter faded into the background, replaced by the crackling of campfires, my heart drummed a rhythm of responsibility I feared I could not uphold. The vibrant tents dotted the landscape, swaying gently in the evening breeze, their colors contrasting with the shadows stretching into the darkness as night approached. My gaze shifted to the cliffs framing the caldera, their towering presence both comforting and oppressive. I could almost sense past conversations bouncing off the stone, whispers of hope and despair entwined. Each sound, each flickering flame, seemed to call for my leadership, yet the burden of expectation pressed down on my shoulders. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the cool air wrap around me, chilling my resolve. A sudden gust pulled me from my thoughts, sending ripples across the lake's surface. The bitter taste of salt clung to my lips, a reminder of fears unvoiced. I opened my eyes, the world around me brightened with the last rays of sunlight disappearing behind the cliffs. I stood, muscles tense under the weight of my decision. How could I guide my people when shadows of doubt clouded my heart? Yet, in the distance, the low murmur of voices from the camp surged in my mind, a chorus urging me to act. As the sun surrendered to the horizon, the sky morphed into a profound indigo, each star a flickering hope, whispering promises to those gathered by the fires. I took a deep breath, the scents of wildflowers and fresh earth filling my lungs, a potent reminder of life's fragility and beauty. With renewed resolve, I turned back towards the camp, ready to embrace my role as leader. The fear coiled within me, but amidst the shadows and flickering flames, a surge of determination coursed through me. It was time to gather.
The morning sun spilled over Haven's embrace, illuminating vibrant wildflowers that danced in the gentle breeze, their sweet scent mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. Gaiya Yelith stood before the crowd of refugees, his heart echoing the distant rhythm of drumbeats. Inhaling deeply, he was pulled back to sun-drenched meadows of his childhood, where laughter flowed as freely as rivers. But here anxiety clung to the air, thick as fog, shadows of doubt lurking in the furrows of anxious brows. How could he offer hope when an oppressive weight dragged him down? Gaiya took a breath, a soft rustle filling the air, and began, "Dear friends, lend me your ears. We stand together as one. We have faced many storms, yes, and we have emerged stronger, more resilient." He paused, drawing intricate patterns in the sand with his foot, a habit from his childhood, a way to gather his thoughts. The echoes of his ancestors seemed to weave through the tension, urging him on. "I have a plan, a way to ensure our safety." But his words hung in the air as the crowd shifted, eyes darting towards a noise from the edge of the camp. A group of hostile locals emerged from the shadows, faces twisted in contempt. The air crackled with tension, smothering the hope he had tried to instill. "Stay calm," he urged, voice rising a pitch. "They won't." Panic erupted, flaring wildly like fire on dry grass, radiating off them as disbelief filled their murmurs. Their eyes questioned him, bodies tensing as they retreated from the threat. Gaiya stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace, pulse racing. "We can't let fear divide us." He swallowed hard, memories of past failures looming like dark clouds, threatening to engulf him. He had to be the anchor now, not the storm. "Trust in me, I beg of you. Together we shall." His voice faltered as the locals moved closer, their intentions clear. Whispers behind him grew louder, accusations hidden in fear. "He's led us to danger." Gaia's breath hitched as he stepped back, the once intricate patterns in the sand now a chaotic mess beneath his feet. "No, please," he pleaded, feeling walls of isolation close in. The sweet scent of wildflowers turned bitter, a reminder of the beauty he could no longer protect. "Let me show you." The words slipped through his fingers like sand, heavy and unconvincing. The crowd's fear was palpable, suffocating. Suddenly, a child's voice broke through the din, small yet fierce. "You promised us safety." The words cut through him, a reminder of the hope he had tried to kindle. He looked at the child, wide eyes searching for reassurance. As dusk settled over Haven's embrace, the sun dipped low, casting a warm golden glow across the shimmering lake's surface. Gaiya Yelith stood at the water's edge, a cool breeze tugging at his hair, a gentle reminder of the chaos that had unfolded hours earlier. The sweet scent of blooming wildflowers mingled with damp earth, stirring memories of laughter and innocence that felt worlds away. Each ripple in the water echoed the panic in the eyes of the refugees.
He inhaled deeply, letting the fading warmth wash over him, battling the chill of doubt threatening to engulf him as twilight deepened around him. Gaiya crouched, fingers tracing the grains of sand, drawing intricate patterns as his thoughts spiraled. The laughter of children from the camp felt like a distant echo, a stark contrast to the horrors he had witnessed. He paused, the weight of their trust pressing against him, and hummed softly to himself, a melody from his childhood, a time before his past had turned heavy with guilt. If only he could weave a story that would wrap around their fears, a tale that could shield them from the darkness creeping in. But could he even find the words? The calm surface of the lake belied the storm within. I am no beast, I am, Gaiya, I will guide them, I must guide them, he murmured, his voice barely rising above the rustle of leaves. Memories of his training days flooded back, the sun warming his skin as he learned to heal, yet that warmth had turned to ash when his powers spiraled out of control, leaving only destruction and the ghost of his friend. A bitter taste settled in his mouth. How could he lead when he had failed once before? He stood patterns in the sand, washed away by a gentle wave, mirroring the chaos in his mind. A deep breath filled his lungs, the earthy aroma mingling with floral sweetness, triggering a memory of that fateful day. The scent of charred earth and fear loomed, a reminder of the life he had once known. I must do better, I must. His voice trailed off, the words heavy on his tongue. Doubt gnawed at him, yet the thought of the refugees depending on him ignited a flicker of resolve. He turned his back on the past, determined to face the future. What if they learn the truth, he whispered, the question biting at his resolve. Shadows lengthened as the sun dipped lower, and he sensed the weight of their gazes, the desperate hope in their eyes. Would they turn from him if they knew? Would they see him as the monster he feared he was? His fingers tapped nervously against his thigh as he began to pace, drawing circles in the sand with his feet. The familiar rhythm calmed his racing thoughts, but anxiety twisted in his stomach. I am not a monster, I am Gaiya, I can help them, I...
Chapter 3 Echoes of Dawn. Morning light spilled over Haven's embrace, casting long shadows on the gathered refugees. Gaiya Yelith stood at the forefront, an urgent rhythm thrumming in her chest as she faced the crowd. The air was thick with tension, murmurs of uncertainty rippling through the group. The peace shattered, a cacophony of shouts and gunfire erupting from the canyon entrance. Panic surged, and Gaiya had to act, to rally these people who depended on her, the ghosts of her past looming large in her mind. As chaos unfolded, Gaia's gaze darted to a cluster of children, their wide eyes reflecting terror as they huddled together. Time stretched, the weight of her choice pressing down on her. She couldn't let them be left behind. She had to protect them. Stay close to me, she shouted, her voice steady despite the turmoil. She moved toward the frightened children, an adrenaline surge coursing through her. Every instinct urged her to flee, but she steeled herself, drawing on every ounce of courage she had. The locals surged forward, their shouts crashing against her like waves. She grasped the hands of the children, feeling their small fingers tremble. We need to find shelter, she urged, scanning the area. The refugees around her began to stir, some moving to follow her lead, while others remained paralyzed by fear. Gaia's resolve hardened. She wouldn't let history repeat itself. With a quick nod to a few older children, she directed them to guide the others as she led the group away from the chaos. As they moved deeper into the canyon, Gaiya could still hear the distant sounds of conflict, but she focused on the path ahead, determined to keep her makeshift family safe. This was her chance to rewrite the narrative, to stand firm and protect those who looked to her for guidance. The canyon walls loomed around them, a fortress against the chaos outside, and she vowed to hold strong until the storm passed. The campfire's glow flickered as Gaiya stepped deeper into Haven's embrace, where the vibrant laughter of children filled the morning air. Hope clung to the refugees like dew on grass, yet unease twisted in his gut. He squared his shoulders, urgency thrumming in his veins. The beauty of dawn, the sun spilling golden light over the shimmering lake, stood in stark contrast to the encroaching threat. Now he was their shield, burdened by their expectations. Memories of lost faces clawed at his mind, but he steeled himself as he spoke. We shall guard this sanctuary as the stars guard the night sky. A ripple of anxiety swept through the gathered refugees.
Gaia's gaze darted among their faces, searching for confidence, but finding only fear. He raised his hands, palms out, urging calm. Hark, we must weave a protective circle, drawing our young ones close to our hearts. The words tasted bitter on his tongue, a desperate plea rather than a rallying cry. The children, small and vulnerable, replaced their laughter with cries of panic. Memories of lost faces clawed at his mind, tightening his chest. The ground trembled as a distant shout pierced the air, sharp and alarming. Chaos erupted. Locals surged through the trees, faces twisted with rage, weapons gleaming in the sunlight. Gaiya lunged forward, pulse racing. "Get back!" he shouted, but his command was lost in the clamor. The refugees scattered, fear fracturing their unity. He had to keep them safe, but shadows of his past loomed, reminding him of what could be lost again. He sprinted toward the nearest cluster of children, desperation fueling every step, but the crowd surged like a tide, pushing him away. A child's scream cut through the chaos, a piercing shriek that twisted like a knife. Gaia's pulse quickened. Where? Which direction? He scanned the sea of bodies, searching, praying. The laughter that had once echoed was now replaced by terror. He staggered, breath hitching, memories of a similar scene flooding his mind, faces slipping away, screams drowned by the roar of battle. This cannot be our fate, not once more under the gaze of the stars. He cried, determination surging within him. He had to find them. He had to turn this fate around. A moment of clarity sliced through the chaos. He spotted them, 3 small figures huddled near the edge of the camp, eyes wide with terror. Relief surged, but it was short-lived as the locals barreled closer, their shouts a storm. Gaiya surged forward. "Stay where you are," the command tore from his throat as he closed the distance.
Dusk enveloped Haven's embrace, casting a soft glow over the towering cliffs that rose like sentinels around the caldera. The fading sunlight painted the landscape in rich violets and burnt oranges, reflecting in the shimmering lake at its heart. Gaiya stood at the water's edge, where the lake mirrored the sky's transformation, swirling with hints of turquoise and gold. The sweet scent of blooming wildflowers mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil, a testament to resilience amidst the challenges surrounding her. Nearby, the distant laughter of children and the crackling of campfires created a comforting backdrop, infusing the air with a sense of hope despite the shadows of uncertainty. As a cool breeze brushed against her skin, Gaiya contemplated the weight of her guilt, seeking the strength she feared was lost. Gaia's thoughts raced back to the ambush, chaos echoing in her mind like the calls of night birds taking flight. The innocent laughter nearby twisted into a reminder of what she risked losing. Kneeling at the water's edge, she traced her fingers over the smooth stones, grounding herself as memories of past failures surged. The lake shimmered invitingly, reflecting her insecurities. She wished to escape her thoughts, yet the remaining warmth of the sun enveloped her, urging her to confront her fears instead. Her reverie was broken by the sound of footsteps on the gravel. A small figure stepped from the shadows, a child with wide, curious eyes searching for connection. Gaia's heart skipped at their gaze, a gentle reminder of her burden. "Are you sad?" the child asked, their voice a fragile note in the evening air. Gaiya hesitated, the innocence in their tone tugging at her heart. How could she convey the darkness that loomed nearby, yet something within her stirred, warmth igniting the cold fear that had settled deep. "Though sadness fills my heart, I shall gather my strength to be brave for you, little one," she replied, her voice steadying, anchored by the child's presence. The child's smile illuminated the shadows clouding Gaia's mind. In that moment, the canyon transformed. The wildflowers danced in the evening breeze, reflecting the joy she once felt. Standing taller, Gaiya welcomed the warmth of the sun, inhaling the sweet scent of flowers as she made her decision. No longer could she hide from her past. It was time to share her story and weave her experiences into the fabric of their community. "Hear me, my friends, for I carry stories woven with both light and shadow," she called out, her voice strong, drawing the attention of the gathered refugees. As dusk settled deeper, painting the canyon in twilight hues, Gaiya opened her mouth, ready to voice the tales of her struggles and triumphs, understanding that vulnerability was a bridge to the heart. As dusk enveloped Haven's embrace, the once vibrant refuge fell into a shroud of shadows, smoke curling through the air, heavy with dread. Gaiya Yelith, a beacon of resolve amidst the chaos, surveyed the frightened faces of the remaining refugees, wide-eyed children clinging to their parents, trembling adults clutching each other in fear. "We must depart swiftly, my friends. Urgency surrounds us," he called out, his melodic voice cutting through the rising panic. The locals would strike again, his instinct screamed at him. With only 3 days left until the week's end, the weight of their survival pressed upon him, a burden he could not afford to drop. Failure was unthinkable. He would fight for their safety until his last breath. The echoes of laughter that once filled the air faded, replaced by the distant thud of boots pounding the earth. Gaia's pulse quickened. "Come close, my dear ones. A safe haven awaits us." Panic surged through the group as shadows lengthened, children whimpered, and adults cried out in despair. He reached for a small child, but a scream shattered the air. The locals, emboldened and regrouped, surged from the tree line, their figures slicing through the dusk like blades. Gaia's throat tightened. He pressed forward, determined to keep them together as chaos loomed. Now, move. Fear enveloped the refugees, their desperation palpable. Gaiya pushed through the throng, his resolve solidifying. "We can't stay here." But the crowd surged backward, scattering like leaves caught in a tempest. He glimpsed the small girl again, her face a mask of terror. Each moment stretched on as he reached for her, but another wave of locals forced him to retreat. "Come on, we must regroup." Just as he managed to gather a few, a loud crack echoed nearby, sending a plume of dust into the air. Panic erupted among the refugees. Gaia's spirit plummeted. In the flickering light, he saw children crying out, mothers desperately searching for their little ones. The hope of safety turned bitter in his mouth. No, not this time. He pushed deeper into the throng, determined to save as many as he could. "Stay close, don't get lost," he shouted, his voice trying to pierce through the rising tide of fear. Gaiya fought against the surging crowd, desperation thickening the air around him. He saved a few, but the echoes of the abandoned gnawed at his conscience. Each step away from the chaos felt like betrayal. As he turned to lead the remaining refugees, the twisted shadows of the trees loomed ominously, a chilling reminder that they were not safe yet. The locals would not relent, and time was slipping away. Gaia's heart raced, the promise he'd made standing before him like an unmovable mountain. He would protect them or die trying. The fear and chaos surrounding him only fueled Gaia's determination. Every heartbeat was a reminder of the stakes at hand. With the shadow As dusk settled over Haven's embrace, the canyon refuge transformed into a tapestry of shadows, thickening with an unspoken threat. Gaiya Yelith steeled himself, pulse quickening with urgency. Each step felt weighted as he gathered the remaining refugees, their faces taut with fear and uncertainty. The air buzzed with distant laughter and muted conversation from makeshift camps, a bitter reminder of the fragile peace they once knew. But tranquility was illusory, and Gaiya felt an impending menace in the air. He had to regroup and find a defensible position. Failure was not an option, not again. We must move quickly, my friends. The shadows draw near and we cannot linger here. Gaia's voice sliced through the fading light, urgency woven into every word. The refugees exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. He scanned the crowd, counting frightened faces. If they could reach the wood's edge, safety awaited them. A child clung to his leg, wide-eyed and trembling. Gaiya knelt, steadying the boy's shoulders with gentle hands. "Remain by my side, I shall guard you from harm." The boy nodded, but Gaiya could see the fear in his eyes. A rustle in the trees sent a shiver through the group. "This way," he urged, leading them toward the thicket, where shadows promised concealment. The first arrow whistled past, like a death knell, embedding itself in the ground just inches from Gaia's foot. Panic surged. "Run!" He propelled the child ahead, adrenaline surging as cries pierced the air. The refugees scattered, their fear manifesting in screams. Gaiya lunged toward a woman dragging a crying toddler, the child's wails sharp against the chaos. "We must depart immediately," he urged, but the woman hesitated, fear etched into her features. Gaiya gripped her arm, urgency igniting his voice. "Please, we must go now." They turned as attackers surged forward, a relentless tide crashing against their fragile defenses. Gaia's resolve faltered, guilt gnawing at him. "No!" The cry erupted from him as he watched a child stumble, tripping over roots and stones, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Gaiya pushed through the throng, grabbing the boy just as a local lunged, a knife glinting ominously in the dim light. Gaia's grip tightened, yanking the child to safety, but chaos coiled around them.
He felt breath come in ragged gasps, the faces of children lost to the night haunting him. With every frantic heartbeat, Gaiya scanned for anyone left standing. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a woman cradling a child, her lips pressed tight in a silent prayer.
Chapter 4. Awakening in the Canyon. Dawn washed over Haven's embrace, bathing the canyon in soft light that illuminated the weary faces before Gaiya Yelith. Doubt shadowed their features, and the weight of past failures pressed down on him, obscuring his resolve. He had fought for their safety, but the memories of the previous night haunted him, swirling around him like ghostly whispers. Today he needed to ignite a spark of hope to guide them through the darkness. An undercurrent of anxiety thrummed in the air, a tension that felt ready to snap with the slightest provocation. Gaiya raised his arms, palms open to the sky, a silent plea for unity. We gather as one, a chorus of voices that have weathered despair. Each thread of our stories is stitched with both agony and tenacity. We are not echoes of what we once were. We are a living mosaic, each piece a vivid testament to our survival. His voice rang out, trembling yet fierce, as he surveyed the crowd. A glimmer of hope sparked in some eyes, while others remained stony and resolute. A woman near the front crossed her arms tightly, her stance defiant. "What do you know of hope?" she spat, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. Gaiya pushed forward, determined to bridge the widening chasm. "Hear me, kindred spirits," he urged. "The river flows despite the rocks that would dam it. We can flow too, together." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but the woman's glare stung sharper than any rebuke. Doubt clawed at his mind, tightening its grip as others shifted uneasily, their eyes darting like frightened birds. Gaiya clenched his fists, grounding himself. "I have walked through the ashes of despair and risen from them. We can rise together." Gaia's gaze settled on a boy in the front row, eyes wide with uncertainty, caught in a struggle between fear and curiosity. He leaned forward slightly, as if the mere act of believing was too heavy to bear. "What if it doesn't work?" the boy whispered, voice trembling. The boy's question broke the silence, his voice a whisper that trembled. "What if it does?" Gaiya countered, a spark igniting within. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, intent on weaving a connection. "Together we can create a new story, one filled with the light of healing and hope. We owe it to ourselves, to each other." The crowd shifted, a murmur of voices rising and falling like the tide. Some faces softened, while others remained resolute. Gaia's breath caught, doubt clawed at his mind, tightening its grip. He remembered the flickering flames from the night before, the faces of the children he had fought for. "We cannot let fear dictate our futures," he roared, his voice echoing against the canyon walls. Dawn light crept over the healing grounds, casting a warm glow on the weary yet expectant faces gathered at the edge of Hope Canyon. Gaiya stood at the forefront, the weight of their despair pressed down on his chest. He scanned the crowd, their eyes flickering with doubt, some casting furtive glances at one another, measuring trust. They lingered on the edge of uncertainty, the air crackling with tension, unspoken fears swirling around them. Could they find solace together? As the first rays of sun kissed the earth, he inhaled deeply, the scent of damp soil mingling with the ghost of hope. The moment felt fragile yet charged with energy, urging him onward. Gaiya stepped forward, grounding himself in the soft earth beneath his feet. "I remember a time when darkness loomed over my village, when despair clawed at our hearts. We were fractured, yet we found a way to stitch ourselves together, one thread at a time. Together we created something beautiful from our pain. It was in that unity I discovered the true essence of healing." His voice, steady yet raw, echoed against the canyon walls, enveloping the crowd in warmth. Faces turned toward him, some eyes narrowing in skepticism, others softening with the slightest flicker of understanding. A murmur rippled through the crowd, skepticism battling with a yearning for connection. Gaiya pressed on, each word a fragile bridge spanning the chasm of their fear. "I lost my brother in the chaos. The memories we honored together ignited a spark within me. We can't erase our past, but we can weave it into a tapestry of resilience. Here today, we can honor our losses, acknowledge our fears, and dare to dream of tomorrow together." He raised his arms, palms open, inviting. The gesture lingered, both a challenge and a promise. A child shifted in the crowd, tugging at her mother's sleeve.
Gaiya caught the movement, and a surge of hope flooded through him. Let it become a ritual that acknowledges our past and envisions our future. I invite you to join me in a circle, to share your stories, however painful. It is in those stories that we may find our strength. In vulnerability we bloom, in unity we thrive. He watched as some hesitated, fingers twitching, breaths shallow, yet a few began to step forward, their feet tentative but resolute, as if the ground beneath them surged with promise. The last of the night shadows receded, as the sun rose high, illuminating the healing grounds with a golden hue. Gaia's heart raced with anticipation and fear. Would they embrace this moment? Would they gather the scattered pieces of their lives and forge something new? As they formed a circle, hands reaching out, a sense of shared purpose enveloped them. The echoes of their past softened, replaced by
the healing grounds sprawled beneath the midday sun, vibrant wildflowers swaying gently in the warm breeze, their sweet scent mingling with the acrid smoke of smoldering campfires. Tall caldera walls loomed overhead, casting fractured shadows across the uneven ground. Gaiya inhaled deeply, the rich aroma of damp earth and the distant rush of water from a nearby stream invigorating him. An electric tension hung in the air, filled with hushed whispers and heated disagreements echoing off the rocky terrain. As he gathered the refugees, skepticism radiated from their anxious glances, heavy and unyielding, pressing down on him like an unseen weight. Gaiya stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he steadied his voice. Together we can heal. Each of you carries a story of pain, but today we transform that into strength. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, nearly drowned out by the crackling campfires. He scanned the faces before him, searching for a flicker of belief. Near the edge of the circle, a woman with tear-streaked cheeks stood rigid, arms crossed, her defiance a stark contrast to the gentle sway of the wildflowers. Gaia's resolve hardened. He needed to reach her, to bridge the divide that threatened to unravel them all. Words are just words, Gaiya. A skeptic's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and clear. What proof do we have this ritual will change anything? Muffled gasps rippled through the crowd, an electric tension tightening around Gaia's throat. The sun blazed above, its glaring light harsh against his skin, as if judging his every word. The bitterness of fear lingered on his tongue, dry and ashen, and he struggled to quell the tide of anxiety. But not all was swayed by doubt. A man with weary eyes stepped forward, his hands trembling but determined. I believe in the power of this moment, Gaiya. We owe it to ourselves to try. His voice rang out like a beacon amidst the clamor, igniting a spark of hope among the crowd. The sun's warmth mingled with the cool breeze whispering through the canyon, urging them towards unity. As the murmurs settled into a tentative silence, Gaiya took a deep breath, the rich aroma of wildflowers filling his lungs, mingling with the simmering smoke that lingered in the air. Their anxious expressions and shifting postures spoke of uncertainty, yet also a glimmer of determination sparked to life among the group. The healing grounds, with its scars and beauty, stood as a testament to their resilience. Here, amidst the echoes of dissent and the potential for transformation, they stood on the cusp of something powerful. If they could surrender to the ritual, perhaps they could reshape their fractured spirits into something whole. But would the healing grounds buzzed beneath the midday sun, an electric tension weaving through the crowd. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center, the sweet scent of wildflowers mingling with the smoky remnants of campfires, each breath a reminder of the fragile hope hanging in the air. The uneven rocky ground felt alive underfoot, each patch of soft earth a whisper of resilience. Voices hummed around him, anticipation and skepticism crackling like distant flames. Gaiya drew a deep breath, allowing the calming aroma to wash over him as he prepared to guide the ritual that could mend their collective wounds. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down, a mixture of hope and doubt that mirrored his own inner turmoil. Gaia's fingers traced the intricate patterns he'd drawn in the sand, each swirl a quiet mantra against the gnawing doubts surrounding him. Together, we weave the threads of our healing, like the stars that guide us through the night, he began, his voice steady yet melodic, rising above the murmurs. Through stories we bind our pain, through shared breaths we ignite our hope. This ritual, he paused, locking eyes with a woman at the edge of the crowd, her arms crossed defiantly. The scent of damp earth stirred a memory from home, a time when he faced similar resistance. Among his fellow healers,
Doubts had loomed like dark clouds. He pressed on, fingers tightening around the small trinket in his pocket, a token of his lost friend. Let your hearts open like the petals of the blossoms in the sun, trusting in the dance of our souls. A voice sliced through the air, sharp as a blade. And what proof do you have? What has this ritual ever done for us? The speaker, a man with rugged features and a voice laced with bitterness, stepped forward, igniting a ripple of unease among the group. Gaia's hands trembled slightly, uncertainty gnawing at him as he faced the crowd. The man continued, his words dripping with skepticism. You expect us to believe in your stories when we've seen nothing but despair. Gaia's mind raced with memories, each one threatening to drown out his resolve. He swallowed hard, resisting the urge to retreat into silence. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice firm yet gentle. I cannot erase your pain, nor can I promise miracles. Yet I can offer you the echoes of my journey, the scars that tell tales of resilience and rebirth. A shift in the crowd's energy, skepticism momentarily eclipsed by curiosity. An older woman stepped forward, her voice trembling yet resolute. We've all lost, haven't we? I lost my son. Her words resonated with shared grief, binding them together. One by one, others began to share their stories, each voice a thread weaving.
The sun hung high over the healing grounds, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the weight of collective grief. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center, his pulse quickened as he bore the burden of their shared sorrow. Let's weave our stories together. Like stars in a dark sky, each one a flicker of hope amidst the shadows, he urged, his voice steady yet thick with emotion. The refugees lingered in the shadows, skepticism etched on their faces, their eyes clouded with loss. Time slipped away. If they didn't unite, the promise he made would vanish, burdening him with shame and haunting echoes of disappointment. Gaiya took a step forward, hands trembling slightly as he gestured to the circle of weary faces. Each story shared is a step towards healing. We have just 5 days left to gather our strength. Tension rose, oppressive and thick in the afternoon air. A mother clutched her child tighter, the flicker of hope extinguished by the fear of further loss. What if we share our pain, and it only deepens our wounds, she whispered, her voice trembling like the fragile thread of hope they clung to. Gaia's heart raced as he fought against the despair threatening to engulf them. A silence fell, thick with unease, as he continued, I sense your trepidation, shadows encroach on us all, and if we shield our hearts, we will be consumed by the abyss. Time was running short, 3 days left before the promise he made would bind him in chains of regret. Would they trust him enough to join in this ritual? He caught the eye of an older man, a hardened veteran of loss, who stood at the edge of the group, arms crossed defiantly. The man shook his head, eyes narrowed. You want us to believe that sharing our stories will heal us? What if it does the opposite? What if it shatters what little hope we have left? Gaia's stomach twisted. The weight of their collective doubt pressed down, almost suffocating. If we don't try, we'll never know a future beyond this despair. Finally, a few heads began to nod, hesitant but willing. Gaia's breath caught in his throat. Yes, together we can rise, but we must catch the fleeting moments before they slip through our fingers. The air crackled with a faint spark of possibility, but reluctance still clung to many, the fear of being vulnerable. Would it be enough? Would their stories weave a new future before the week closed in on them? As the first drops of rain splattered against the ground, panic surged, the storm approached, threatening to interrupt their fragile gathering. The moment hung in the air, charged with emotion, as Gaiya gazed into the eyes of those gathered. We must not allow fear to dictate our fate. Let us stand together, share our stories, and rise above this tempest. The storm outside raged, but within the circle, a flicker of determination. Chapter 5 Embers of Hope. Dawn broke over Haven's embrace, casting a golden hue on the gathering of weary refugees huddled together, their faces etched with resilience and trepidation. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center, determined to unite them through an ancient ritual promising healing and strength. The looming deadline of the week pressed upon him like an anchor, a constant reminder that redemption was fleeting. The air crackled with tension as he raised his arms, ready to lead them into a shared story that might save them all from despair. Yet storm clouds gathered overhead, threatening to sweep away their fragile hope before it could take root. Gaiya inhaled deeply, the scent of damp earth mingling with the anxiety that clung to the crowd. Let us weave our tales together like the threads of an ancient tapestry.
His voice resonated against the rising wind, urgency seeping into every word. Just as he prepared to invoke the sacred words that would bind them, a distant shout shattered the fragile calm. Panic rippled through the gathered refugees. Gaiya spun around, dread coursing through him. The hostile locals had come, their figures rushing towards the crowd like a dark wave ready to crash. No, not now. The pressure mounted with each heartbeat, and if he couldn't protect them, everything he'd worked for would unravel. Chaos broke as the locals surged through the perimeter, brandishing crude weapons and shouting threats. Gaia's breath caught in his throat. Refugees screamed, scattering in every direction, their hope fracturing like glass underfoot. He lunged forward, but the scene devolved into a whirlwind of confusion. He had to act, but how could he unite them when fear splintered their resolve? A girl, barely 10, was seized by a local, her terrified cry slicing through the chaos. Gaia's resolve faltered. He was supposed to lead, to inspire, yet here he was, faced with the weight of his own past mistakes. The promise of safety he'd made felt like a cruel joke, and the pressure mounted as the deadline approached. They had only hours left before he would have to confront his own failures, the ones he had avoided for too long. "We can't let them take her," a voice shouted from the back, a plea laced with desperation. Gaia's heart sank as he met the eyes of the assembly, all of them waiting for him to act. Time rushed by, and he stood at a crossroads. He could either lead an attack to save the girl, risking more lives, or retreat and let fear claim them all. The locals surged forward, and the weight of his past mistakes pressed against Gaiya, threatening to crush the fragile hope he'd sought to harness. He took a shaky step forward, but the ground beneath him shifted, the storm overhead rumbling ominously. The pressure throbbed in his ears as he clenched his fists, unsure if he could.
Morning light filtered through the crumbling walls of Haven's embrace, illuminating the faces of weary refugees huddled together in fear. The breathtaking caldera, surrounded by towering cliffs draped in vibrant green foliage, created a stark contrast to the dread that filled the air. At the center, a shimmering lake reflected hues of turquoise and gold, but today its beauty felt overshadowed by the imminent threat. Gaiya Yelith stood before the group, hands slick with sweat. "We can't let them take us," he shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. The attackers were closing in, their shadows creeping long and menacing over the terrified crowd. Time slipped through his fingers. If he didn't rally them now, the consequences would be permanent, and he would lose the chance to atone for his past mistakes. Gaiya scanned their faces, searching for hope amid the chaos. "We must stand together," he urged, but murmurs of doubt rippled through the crowd. Just beyond the encampment, locals surged forward, eyes glinting with malice. A woman shrieked as two men dragged her sister away, her pleas swallowed by the cacophony of fear. With urgency pressing down on him, Gaiya stepped forward, hands raised, trying to project authority. "We need to fight back!" But the refugees were losing faith. A child began to cry, and Gaia's determination wavered. "Please, we have to unite," he implored, but voices around him grew louder, drowning him out. The locals laughed, emboldened by the discord, and one of them pointed a weapon directly at Gaiya. A shiver coursed through him. Every second lost was another opportunity for violence. Gaiya felt a sinking feeling in his chest. If he couldn't protect them now, how could he ever hope to find redemption? A man stepped forward, trembling but determined. "What do? We can't fight them. They'll kill us." Panic spread through the crowd. "We can't give in," Gaiya shouted, but his voice cracked. He was losing them, one by one, faces turned away, fear eclipsing the flicker of hope he had ignited moments ago. It felt like quicksand, pulling him under as the crowd began to disperse, their faith in him unraveling. The sound of a crash echoed through the encampment as the first line of refugees was pushed aside, screams piercing the morning air. Gaiya felt a sinking feeling in his chest. He was losing them, losing his chance at redemption. He understood at that moment, if he couldn't unite them now, the promise he had made would haunt him forever. With the attackers advancing, Gaiya weighed his options, rally the few who still believed or flee to save himself. Time was running out, and the decision loomed. Dusk settled over the healing grounds like a fragile veil, the air thick with the mingling scents of damp earth and burnt wood. Smoke from campfires spiraled lazily, twisting and curling amid the distant rush of water, a soothing sound that barely masked Gaia's tumultuous thoughts. She knelt on the uneven ground, fingers tracing patterns in the soft earth, a cool breeze sending shivers through her. The wildflowers, resilient and fragrant, stood defiantly among the rubble, a reminder of the hope she sought. Doubts and failures whispered around her as shadows loomed, each moment stretching painfully before her. Time was short, and every heartbeat echoed with the urgency of clarity. Would she embrace the stories that had once given her strength, or would despair claim her? The echoes of the past pressed against her, urging her to retreat from the burden of leadership that felt overwhelming. Gaia's breath quickened, her palms clammy as she thought of the haunting echoes of her friend's laughter, now drowned in the chaos she had failed to avert. The scent of wildflowers evoked memories of home, sharply contrasting with the acrid smoke that stung her nostrils. Stories of her ancestors swirled in her mind, urging her to rise even as their losses weighed her down. Would they forgive her for her failures? Gaiya glanced around, hearing only the rustle of leaves in the stillness. "Every story has to matter, right?" she murmured to the flowers, fingers tracing intricate lines in the earth. "I can't let the darkness win. Not now, not ever." Her voice trembled, but a melody emerged from her words, igniting quiet conviction within her. The silence seemed to listen, as if waiting for her resolve. "Mark my words, we will unite. We will stand together. I will not let their trust dissipate like smoke." Yet doubt draped over her like a heavy cloak, making her shoulders slump. Memories tugged at her, the scent of scorched earth from her childhood training, mixing with the fragrant blooms around her. "No more running," she whispered, determination threading through her voice. Among the despair of the captured, a spark of resolve ignited within her. "I will gather them. We will fight back." Together the shadows lengthened, wrapping around her as she stood, heart pounding with newfound resolve. The air trembled with the weight of her decision, the cries of the refugees a chorus that propelled her forward. Gaiya inhaled deeply, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath her, the wildflowers brushing against her fingertips like a promise. "Together we can make it through this," she vowed into the dusk, the words a balm for her own soul as much as for those who counted on her. She strode toward the camp, shadows trailing behind her. As dusk settled over the healing grounds, the air brimmed with the scent of crushed herbs mingling with the faint smoke from campfires. Gaiya stood at the edge of the open space, surrounded by makeshift tents that flickered with light against the encroaching shadows. He clutched his chest, recalling his vow. "Together we will heal." Taking a deep breath, he drew strength from the vibrant wildflowers that clung stubbornly to life amidst the rocky terrain. In the distance, whispers of fear echoed among the refugees, creating a haunting melody that gnawed at him. This was his moment to ignite hope and rally the weary souls clinging to the remnants of their shattered lives. He stepped forward, voice steady, as doubt crept into his mind. "Hear me if you will." Faces turned toward him, hollow and wary, eyes brimming with unshed tears and unspoken fears. Gaia's voice wavered, but he pressed on. "We have lost so much, but we are still here. We must stand together." A few heads nodded, yet most remained bowed, their shoulders slumped under the weight of despair. From the back, someone whispered, "What can you do? You can't protect us from the darkness. We saw it last night." Each word pierced him, their collective disillusionment, digging into his resolve like shards of glass. He opened his arms, inviting connection, yet they shrank back as if his very presence could summon the violence they dreaded. His heart raced as he swallowed hard. "I shall not forsake you," he pleaded, desperation threading through his tone. A flicker of hope ignited in a few faces, but it quickly dimmed, extinguished by the shadows of newcomers looming at the camp's edge. Tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating. Gaia's throat tightened. "Please, we must find strength in each other." His words hung there, a fragile bridge between fear and unity. The locals advanced, their forms stark against the twilight, and Gaia's chest constricted. No, not now, not when they were so close. He turned, scanning the faces of the refugees, searching for the spark of defiance he needed to ignite. But the fire in their eyes flickered and faded, extinguished by the encroaching darkness. As the locals drew nearer, the tension coiled tighter around their fragile hope. Gaia's pulse thundered, a war drum echoing in his ears. He locked eyes with a small child, trembling and clutching a faded blanket to her chest. In that gaze, he saw a reflection of every fear he carried, every doubt that threatened to consume him. "Together, we weave our strength," he whispered to the child, and to himself.
But as the first stones flew, he understood the battle was not merely against the darkness outside, but a deeper struggle to unite the hearts of those before him.
Gaiya stood at the edge of the healing grounds as dusk painted the horizon in bruised purples and deep oranges, the air heavy with unspoken fears. A heavy silence enveloped the crowd, pressing against Gaia's chest, amplifying the urgency of the moment. He needed the refugees to unite, to rise against the creeping despair threatening to engulf them. "Together we are stronger," he shouted, his voice faltering as he scanned their faces, hollow and defeated. Behind him, a chorus of hostile shouts rose from the advancing locals, a stark reminder that time was running out. If they faltered now, the promise he had made to heal and protect would become a shackle, dragging him into the abyss of his own failures. They had until the week's end to find redemption, otherwise the consequences would be irreversible. As he stepped closer to the gathered refugees, Gaiya pleaded, "You can't let fear dictate your fate." His voice rose above the threatening shouts behind him, but the refugees' empty, hopeless gazes buried him deeper in despair. The weight of their desolation pressed down on him, and he struggled to breathe. Would they stand together, or would they cower in the shadows? From the edge of the camp, the locals shouted again, their taunts sharp and laced with malice. "Leave now, or face the consequences." Each word sliced through the tension, igniting the air with a sense of impending violence. Fear coursed through Gaiya like ice water. He could see the refugees' bodies tense, flinching at the threats, their resolve crumbling under the weight of hopelessness. Gaia's pulse quickened, each beat a reminder of their dwindling time. He had only days to inspire change before his promise became a ghost, haunting him forever. Desperation tightened his throat as he stepped forward. "You need to stand. Fight back." He glanced at the advancing locals, fists clenched, breath shallow. The air thickened with tension. If they didn't act fast, he risked losing their trust and the chance to redeem himself for all his past mistakes. The locals began throwing stones, the projectiles whistling through the air, and Gaiya froze, the world narrowing to that single moment. Should he confront the attackers or retreat to protect those who still believed in him? His options evaporated, shadows creeping in as night fell. The moment felt suspended, yet time pressed on, each second echoing in Gaia's mind. He gasped as the first stone struck a nearby tent, sending a plume of dust into the air. Panic clawed at him as he shouted once more, "We can't let them take our hope." But the words hung unanswered as the refugees remained paralyzed, their faces etched with fear. Just then, a child screamed, the sound slicing through the tension, and Gaia's heart sank. He had to decide, fight or flee, knowing that either choice could shatter what lit. Chapter 6. Echoes of Empowerment. The canyon loomed ahead, jagged and intimidating, a vast chasm ready to consume any flicker of hope. Gaiya stepped forward, bracing against the whispers of doubt clawing at his mind. The noise of the refugee camp faded, laughter and conversation dissolving into a distant hum, replaced by the chilling silence of the canyon's mouth. Dust hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. He needed the artifact, an ancient relic that could ignite the flickering flames of hope among the people he had sworn to protect. They couldn't lose this battle, not now, not after everything. Shadows of the past clung to him, yet the present demanded courage. With a deep breath he plunged into the darkness. Rubble crunched beneath his boots, a stark reminder of battles fought long before his time. Gaiya scanned the terrain, each step deliberate and calculated. His fingers brushed against the cold stone walls, etched with scars of history, stories waiting to be uncovered. A faint glimmer caught his eye, an opening barely visible, half hidden by overgrowth. He approached, thrill and apprehension intertwining within him. His heart raced as he neared the opening, aware that danger lurked in the canyon's forgotten corners. Doubt gnawed at him, could he return? The opening widened, revealing a small chamber illuminated by the soft glow of the artifact, a circular disc, engraved with symbols pulsating with ancient energy. This was it, the stories of strength and resilience captured in its very essence. He reached forward, fingers trembling, but the moment shattered as a deep voice echoed off the stone walls. "Leave this place, outsider. You do not belong here." Gaiya whirled around, heart pounding, eyes locking onto a fierce figure emerging from the shadows. A local, arms crossed and eyes narrowed, stood before him. "You threaten what is sacred. Leave now, or face the consequences." Gaia's pulse quickened, adrenaline surging through him. Behind the local's fierce gaze lay a desperate hope, one that mirrored his own. He took a step back, weighing his options. Should he defend the artifact, or retreat, keeping the peace?
Memories of the refugee's fear ignited a fire within him. I cannot depart, not when the light of hope shines so near. Together we may weave a new fate, yes? His voice wavered, but determination steadied it. The local remained unmoved, a statue of defiance. Tension crackled between them, a standoff that threatened to shatter everything. Silence enveloped them, heavy with unspoken truths. Gaiya glimpsed the turmoil beneath the locals' bravado, fear of loss, of battles fought in vain. A flicker of understanding sparked between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared plight. Yet the canyon was unforgiving, and time slipped like sand through fingers. The artifact shimmered behind him.
Gaiya Yelith stood at the edge of Haven's embrace, the ancient artifact cradled in her hands, a carved stone pulsating with the tales of her ancestors. Morning light filtered through the canyon, casting a warm glow on the intricate designs that embodied identity and hope. Around her, refugees gathered, their faces a mixture of anticipation and fear. If she didn't secure this stone, the fragile bond they had forged might shatter before the week ended. Redemption slipped through her fingers like sand, and the weight of her promise loomed large. She was determined to convey its significance before time slipped away like water through their fingers. The air thickened with tension as she began to speak. This stone is not merely a relic, but a heartbeat of our existence, pulsing with the tales of our ancestors. Suddenly, a group of locals emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in anger. The leader, a rugged man with a scar slicing through his brow, stepped forward. "That belongs to us. You have no right to claim what isn't yours." Gaia's stomach churned, an urgent need gripping her gut. She had to protect the hope that remained for the refugees, but the locals advanced, fists clenched, and their expressions fierce. "Time slips away like water through our fingers," she shouted, her voice trembling as she pleaded. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears as the locals circled her, their threats escalating. "Hand it over, or we'll take it by force." Gaia's breath quickened, the artifact felt heavier in her grip, and the refugees watched with wide eyes, their fear palpable. She had promised to lead them to safety, to restore their faith in a future, but every moment spent arguing was a moment lost. The locals moved closer, and her resolve began to waver. Should she fight, risking everything, or flee with the artifact, abandoning those who depended on her? The leader lunged forward, and Gaiya instinctively stepped back, the cold stone pressing against her palm. She could run, she could escape and keep the artifact safe, but the idea of leaving the refugees behind felt unbearable. A shout broke through the chaos, igniting a spark of courage. "Gaiya, we need you!" The urgency in the voice reminded her that she had to decide quickly. As she stood there, caught between the desperate cries of her heart and the looming threat, the artifact shifted in her grip. A decision was forming, one that would change everything. With a final shout, adrenaline coursed through her. "If you seek this sacred gift, then approach with honor, for it is not taken lightly." She thrust the artifact forward, challenging the locals. They surged forward, eyes filled with fury, and Gaiya knew she had sparked a conflict that could turn deadly. Time was running out. The air buzzed with the aftermath of a confrontation, the echoes of Gaia's challenge lingering in Haven's embrace. He stood by the water's edge, fingers gripping the artifact like a lifeline, a shield against the chaos he'd unleashed. The sun hung high, casting glimmers on the surface, mocking his inner conflict. Laughter and distant conversations floated through the warm air, a vivid contrast to the fury that had ignited just moments before. Time trickled away, each moment feeling like slipping sand, and he wrestled with a choice, an opportunity for connection or a wall of separation. Gaiya knelt, mud caking his trousers, anchoring him to the earth and reminding him of his place in this world. The artifact rested heavily in his palm, its smooth surface cool against his skin. He stared at the water, the way it danced in the sunlight, reflecting fragments of blue sky and wisps of cloud. Nearby children splashed joyfully, their laughter bright and carefree, while he clenched his jaw, a heaviness settling in his heart. He had fought for their hope, but now doubt clouded his mind. Would they ever trust him? The fury of the locals had surged like a tidal wave, threatening to engulf him. Each shout felt like a blade, cutting deeper into the fragile connection he hoped to forge. The artifact had become a symbol, but what did it represent? Protection or division? Gaiya shifted,
the mud squelching beneath him as if the earth itself urged him to make a choice. Tracing the intricate carvings with his fingertips, he recalled memories of refugees huddled together, sharing whispers of fear and hope. Their faces, worn yet determined, reminded him of why he needed the artifact. Not just to shield them, but to unite them with the locals. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the water, Gaiya rose, resolve hardening within him. He needed to bridge the divide or watch everything he fought for disappear. With a step forward, the cool breeze brushed his face, a whisper of courage against the chill of doubt. The locals had seen him as a defender, but he needed to prove himself, to show the locals that he was no threat. Pausing at the water's edge, the artifact cradled in his hands, he stared into the shimmering depths. The sun stained the sky with hues of orange and crimson, mirroring the conflict that stained their relationship. He could return to the village, extend a hand, and risk rejection or retreat, clutching the artifact like a shield. A choice loomed before him, heavy with consequence. Was this the moment that changed everything? He inhaled deeply, ready to step into the unknown, to seek redemption, or perhaps forge a new path altogether. With newfound determination, Gaiya stepped away from the water.
As dusk settled over Haven's embrace, the sun vanished behind jagged cliffs, casting elongated shadows across the weary faces of the refugees. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center of the makeshift gathering, breathing deeply as he clutched the ancient relic. This was his moment. Failure now would haunt him forever. A promise to find redemption and heal the wounds of his past weighed heavy on his shoulders. Despair hung heavily in the air, thick enough to choke, yet within the relic pulsed the stories of warriors who had defied the odds, urging him to share their legacy. Time was slipping through his fingers, and their hope flickered with each passing second. "Listen," he called, his voice trembling but determined. "This ancient relic whispers of warriors who stood defiant against despair, their spirits echoing through time. We are not the first to face insurmountable odds." Skepticism filled the eyes of the refugees, weary and uncertain. A child whimpered at the edge of the crowd, grasping her mother's arm. Gaiya clenched his fists. He had 3 days to ignite a spark of hope before despair snuffed it out forever. The relentless passage of time echoed in his thoughts, a stark reminder of the stakes. He opened the relic, its ancient pages whispering secrets of valor and resilience. In this canyon, warriors stood against overwhelming forces, not for glory, but for one another. His voice rose with the fervor of the stories. They didn't hesitate, they fought with everything they had. Yet doubt clouded their faces as they retreated into despair, shoulders slumping, hope flickering like a dying ember. Gaia's desperation surged. If he couldn't reach them soon, he would lose them, and with them, his chance at redemption. What if we fail again? The question lingered, heavy and anxious, from the crowd. Gaia's pulse quickened. This was the moment when belief could ignite or extinguish. He needed them to stand with him. But how could he break through the icy grip of fear? He stepped closer, the relic glowing in the fading light, illuminating their faces. Yes, we may stumble, but consider, what if we rise? What if our very lives become legends that inspire the stars? An electric silence enveloped the crowd for a heartbeat before a ripple of energy surged through them. Gaia's breath caught as he spotted a flicker of determination in their eyes. Hope began to blossom. But as it did, a resounding crash echoed from the canyon's mouth, an unsettling reminder that danger still lurked, leaving uncertainty in its wake. What had he awakened? The sun hung low in the afternoon sky, casting a golden hue across Haven's embrace. Gaiya stood at the edge of the shimmering lake, its turquoise waters dancing with flecks of sunlight. The scent of sweet wildflowers mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil. Towering cliffs embraced the caldera, their lush greenery whispering secrets of resilience. Colorful tents dotted the landscape, their vibrant hues fluttering gently in the breeze, echoing the hopes of the refugees gathered close by. The laughter of children reverberated against the stone walls, a sound that filled the air with warmth and vitality, stirring Gaia's resolve to inspire those around him. Gaiya turned to face the group, their faces a mosaic of skepticism and fear. As he raised the ancient artifact, its cool surface glimmered in the sunlight, casting intricate shadows on the ground. Gaiya felt the tension in his shoulders and the tightening in his chest as the group regarded him with skepticism. This artifact, a message from those before us, speaks of battles fought in darkness and the light that follows. It carries tales of strength, even when all seems lost, he proclaimed, his voice steady, resonating against the canyon walls.
He noticed their brows relaxing and their gazes softening as his words took root. As he spoke, the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore seemed to amplify his words, echoing encouragement. Tears brimmed in their eyes, and a few wiped their cheeks as they shared their stories. Gaiya nodded earnestly, tears pooling in his eyes as the tales unfolded around him. The distant crackle of campfires blended with their voices, creating a tapestry of sound that filled the air with a newfound energy. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the caldera, Gaiya straightened, his breath quickening as he surveyed the determined faces surrounding him. They were not just survivors, they were warriors, ready to reclaim their identities and fight for their future together in Haven's embrace.
Chapter 7. Embers of Resurgence. Morning light filtered through the jagged canyon walls, casting flickering shadows on the gathered refugees of Haven's embrace. The air was thick with the scent of wild herbs and the savory aroma of a healing broth simmering over small fires where families huddled together, sharing what little they had. Gaiya Yelith stood before them, a fragile armor of sunlight against the weight of her fears. She caught the eye of an elder, a woman wrapped in rough-spun layers. Her hand pressed over her heart in a gesture of respect as she nodded at Gaiya. Today, she would lead the healing ritual, yet the ghosts of her past failures loomed large, casting a long shadow over her resolve. Gaiya wiped her clammy hands on her tunic, her gaze darting to the ground as she spoke, feeling the weight of expectation settle over her like a heavy cloak. Gaiya breathed deeply, allowing the earthy scent of roasting tubers to anchor her as laughter rang out from children, nibbling on foraged berries nearby. The refugees were hungry, their bellies tight with want, yet they shared the small portion of food they had, passing around dried roots and smoked fish with trembling hands. Each bite was a sacred offering to the spirits lingering in the canyon. She had to inspire them, to fan the flickering hope still lingering in their eyes. Today, she began, her voice wavering as she met their gazes, we honor the lost and seek strength in our shared spirit. As she spoke, Gaiya noted the glistening eyes of the elder, her hand still resting over her heart. The murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by the soft rustle of layered clothing brushing against one another. Each individual bore scars of loss, yet they stood united. Let us remember Ilara, the healer who guides us in our darkest times, she continued, invoking the name that commanded reverence among them. The superstition loomed heavy. Speaking ill of the vanished would invite misfortune, a burden she could not afford. A change rippled through the gathered souls as she continued. The sun rose higher, warming the stones beneath their feet, while Gaiya pushed back the whispers of doubt. Gaiya glanced around, her skin prickling, as if the spirits of her ancestors were watching. Hesitation gripped her, her pulse racing. A sharp intake of breath from a child snapped her back. Gaiya spotted a feather caught in a nearby bush, a vivid splash of color amidst the muted canyon tones. A sign, perhaps, the phoenix bird, a symbol of healing and resilience. Her voice gained strength as she gestured toward the feather. Even in our darkest hour, we have the power to rise anew. Morning light spilled over the healing grounds, casting warm glows on the faces of the gathered refugees. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center, his heart racing as he faced the crowd. Today, he had to inspire them to embrace the healing ritual, transform their shared trauma into a source of strength. The weight of the week pressed down on him like a stone, a relentless reminder that 3 days remained before he had to confront the promise he made. Clearing his throat, he felt urgency enveloping him and began to speak, his voice weaving through the tapestry of their pain and hope. As Gaiya shared the story of his own loss, how he watched his sister fade away amid the chaos of their shattered world, the crowd's skepticism began to soften. One by one, they glanced at each other, recognition flickering in their eyes. Just as the tension seemed to unravel, a voice pierced the air, sharp and defiant. "You think sharing our pain will heal us? Look around." A tall woman stood at the edge of the circle, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes burning with indignation. "We can't afford to be vulnerable." Gaia's pulse quickened. Her words were like knives, slicing through the fragile threads of hope he'd begun to weave. Regaining control felt imperative, but how could he?
The argument escalated, voices rising in a chaotic swell, drowning out Gaia's call to unity. "You don't know what I've lost," a man shouted, grief twisting his features. "How can we trust this ritual? What if it just opens old wounds?" Each word struck Gaiya like a physical blow. Seconds slipped away, a relentless reminder that by the week's end he had to fulfill his promise or lose everything. Sweat clung to his skin as he fought to maintain his composure. Could he regain control before it spiraled out of control? Desperation clawed at Gaiya as he stepped closer to the woman, his voice steadier than he held his breath to steady himself. "We've all faced darkness. Sharing our stories is not weakness, it's a bridge to healing. If we don't try, we're choosing to stay trapped in our pain, and I can't bear to see us lost forever." Yet the crowd remained stirred, doubt thick in the air like fog. Time was running out. He could feel it as surely as the sun rose higher, inching toward noon. He had to act, and fast. Just then a small boy tugged at Gaia's leg, eyes wide with innocence. "Can we really heal?" he asked, voice trembling, and at that moment the weight of every heart in that circle pressed down on him. Gaiya nodded, though doubt clouded his expression. Just as he opened his mouth to reassure the boy, the woman shouted again.
The air thickened with unresolved tension, a palpable weight pressing down on Gaiya at the heart of the healing grounds. The voices of the refugees clashed like stormy waves, drowning his attempts to speak. A woman's sharp rebuke echoed between them. Shadows lengthened in the dusk, the fading light a reminder of the dwindling time he had to mend what was broken. He inhaled deeply, the earthy scent of the ground mingling with the tang of sweat and fear. This was his moment to gather strength, to find clarity amid the chaos. Their hope rested on him. He could not abandon them again. Gaiya closed his eyes, blocking out the swirling chaos. The voices faded, replaced by the whispers of the trees surrounding the healing grounds. Each leaf trembled in the evening breeze, creating a symphony of uncertainty. Memories surged uninvited, pulling him back to a time when he had turned his back on his people, fleeing into the night. A shiver coursed through him. The thought gnawed at him. What if he failed them again? But here he stood, the weight of his past thrumming in his chest, demanding acknowledgement. The moments stretched, wrapping silence tightly around him. He searched for a glimmer of hope in the faces of the refugees. Each bore their scars, etched deep and visible, stories waiting to unfold. The flickering lanterns cast long shadows, illuminating the vulnerability that hung in the air. Would they listen? Would they trust him enough to share their pain and fears? He drew a breath, steadying himself. No rehearsed words, no grand speeches. This had to come from the heart, unfiltered and raw. He stepped forward, the gravel crunching beneath his feet, a sound that sliced through the discontent. "Listen to me," he began, voice steady yet vulnerable, faces turned curiosity mixed with skepticism. "I've returned, a wanderer back from my journey, and I stand before you now, ready to face what I left behind." The murmurs quieted, a fragile stillness wrapping around the crowd. "I extend my hand, inviting you into the circle of our shared experiences, to weave together our tales of sorrow and hope." The weight of their collective silence enveloped him like a shroud. Gaia's heart raced, adrenaline urging him to continue. "We can't forge a path forward alone. I invite you to speak, to share what you carry. Let us unveil our..." As the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the healing grounds, Gaiya Yelith stood resolute before the sacred stones, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands. The air buzzed with the scent of wild herbs simmering over small fires, mingling with the earthy aroma of smoked fish. Around him, refugees huddled in their rough-spun layers, their faces marked by the scars of battle. They clutched bowls of healing broth, rich with foraged berries and dried roots, sharing meals in silence, each sip a tentative step toward rebuilding their strength. Gaiya understood they needed to confront their grief and weave their stories into the canyon's history, honoring those who had vanished as dusk deepened around them. Gaiya took a steadying breath, feeling the heaviness in the air. He scanned the gathering,
Spotting a young woman gripping her bowl, her knuckles pale, moving closer, Gaiya dipped his head in respect, placing a hand over his heart. With honor, I invite you to share your stories, to let the echoes of your pain rise like smoke into the dusk. Together we will transform this burden into strength. Hesitant murmurs began, like the first sparks of a fire kindling. One by one, voices began to rise, each story a thread in their shared experience. An elder recounted the loss of his family, his voice trembling but firm. I saw them fall, taken by the canyon's depths. It said that speaking ill of the vanished invites their wrath, yet I cannot remain silent. Gaiya nodded, aware of the taboo that hovered, a reminder of the anger that lingers when they forget those who came before. As the stories flowed, Gaiya guided them into a collective chant, his voice rising with conviction. Elara, grant us healing. Draxon, protect our lost. Sira, let the echoes of our pain find peace. The words filled the air, shimmering as their grief mingled with hope. The canyon walls pulsed with their voices, the stones absorbing their shared pain, transforming it into a resonant power that charged the twilight. Gaiya observed the refugees begin to lift their heads, newfound resolve shining in their eyes. A young child, no more than 6 summers, stood at the front, her bowl forgotten at her feet. She raised her arms, mimicking the gesture of respect she had seen from the elders, a spark of innocence amidst the heaviness. Gaiya smiled, warmth spreading through him. They were beginning to release their burdens, honoring the spirits without fear, as the last echoes of their chant faded into the dusk. Gaiya felt the canyon embrace them, the shadows softening. The air thrummed with potential, a sign that healing could begin.
The healing grounds glimmered under the dimming light of dusk, a beacon of resilience amidst the turmoil that enveloped their lives. Gaiya Yelith stood at the center, adrenaline coursing through him as he faced the gathered refugees, each face marked by pain and uncertainty. We have only a short time to heal, to turn our pain into strength before the darkness takes us all, he urged, the weight of his unfulfilled promise pressing heavily on his chest. This ritual was their opportunity to unite, to share their stories, and carve out a future free from the ghosts of their past. Every moment lost was a step further from redemption, and the clock was ticking down. Gaia's voice trembled slightly as he spoke, the crowd's reluctance palpable in the air. I know it hurts. The memories of those we've lost are heavy, but we must share them. They deserve to be heard. An uneasy silence fell over them as protest began to stir. One woman shook her head, her hands trembling. What if sharing only makes it worse? What if we can't bear the weight of it all? Her question hung in the air, echoing the collective pain they felt. They stood on the edge of healing, yet the fear of reliving their trauma held them captive, and time was slipping away. Gaiya took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain steady. Please, we don't have much time. If we don't face our memories, we lose our chance to heal and honor those we loved. Silence enveloped them, heavy as the impending night. The ticking clock echoed the promise he had to keep, one he couldn't ignore anymore. One by one, the refugees began to step forward, voices tentative but rising like a chorus, sharing fragments of their pain. Each story was a reminder of the urgency they faced, the need to confront their past before it consumed them. As the last stories flowed into the air, Gaiya motioned for the gathered seeds, symbols of new beginnings. With trembling hands, they planted them deep into the canyon soil, their collective grief transforming into hope. Just as they finished, a low rumble echoed from the mountains, the ground shook beneath them, and the sky darkened ominously. Gaia's heart sank. As the first drops of rain began to fall, a new threat loomed overhead, and as the storm approached, he faced the refugees, their eyes reflecting both fear and determination. This was their moment of choice, to embrace the pain that bound them, or let it shatter them further. As the winds picked up, carrying the scent of rain and earth, Gaiya understood that their journey was far from over. They had taken a significant step forward, but the real battle lay ahead. Would they find the strength to rise against the darkness that threatened to consume them, or would they succumb to despair? The choice was theirs, and time was no longer